I was cleaning out my late father's attic when I found a locked box with my name on it. Inside was a photo of a woman I didn't recognize, and a letter that started with, "You deserve to know the truth." It happened 2 weeks after we buried him. My dad passed suddenly, massive heart attack in his sleep. No goodbyes, no warning, no final moment to make peace. Just one call from my uncle at 6 a.m., and boom, everything flipped. And here's the part that makes it worse. I hadn't spoken to my dad in over 2 years. Not since our last fight. The kind that leaves everything smoldering with no clear way back. The argument was about something stupid, really. I'd gotten a promotion at work that required me to move across the country. Dad thought I was running away from responsibility, from family, from him. I thought he was being controlling and bitter. We both said things we couldn't take back. I remember standing in his kitchen, both of us red-faced and stubborn, and him saying, "Fine, go. But don't expect me to be here when you finally figure out what you're really running from." I walked out that night and never came back. So when my uncle asked if I could help clean out his house, I didn't hesitate. Not because I was eager to go back into the place I grew up, but because I had this weird, gnawing guilt in my chest I didn't know what else to do with. Maybe sorting through his things would give me some kind of closure. Maybe I'd find evidence that he missed me too. The house felt smaller than I remembered. Everything was exactly as I'd left it 2 years ago. Same faded wallpaper, same creaky floorboards, same smell of coffee and wood polish that had permeated every room since childhood. Walking through those rooms was like stepping back in time. Except now they felt hollow, like a museum of a life that was over. I thought I knew what I'd find: old tax stuff, a ton of tools, maybe some photos of my mom, who passed when I was a kid. My dad never remarried, never even dated, far as I knew. He was a private, hard-edged man who showed love in the form of routine and structure. Dinner at 6. Lawn mowed by 10. Silence after 8. I used to joke that if he smiled twice in a day, something was definitely wrong. Growing up, I always wondered if there was more to him than that rigid exterior. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the kitchen window with this distant look, like he was seeing something that wasn't there. When I asked what he was thinking about, he'd just grunt and change the subject. "Nothing important," he'd say. "Just remembering." The attic was where he kept everything he didn't want to deal with, but couldn't bring himself to throw away. Boxes of Christmas decorations we hadn't used since Mom died. Old tax returns going back decades. Broken appliances he swore he'd fix someday. It was organized chaos, everything labeled and stacked with military precision, but somehow still managing to feel abandoned. So when I found that small, rusted lockbox hidden in the far corner of the attic, wedged behind a pile of dusty tarps and a broken lamp, I was expecting paperwork, not secrets. The box had my name carved into the top. Not labeled, but carved. Like he took a knife to the metal and scratched it in with deliberate effort. For Eli. The letters were uneven, shaky, like whoever did it was fighting with himself the whole time. That alone gave me chills. This wasn't something he'd done casually. It was locked, but I popped it open with an old screwdriver I found in his toolbox downstairs. Inside, a black and white photo of a woman I didn't recognize. Auburn hair pulled back loosely, laugh lines crinkling around bright eyes. She was laughing in the picture, hand over her mouth like someone had just told the world's funniest joke. There was a familiarity to her, though, something in the eyes, the way she held her head. Like looking at a stranger who somehow felt like family. The photo was worn around the edges, like it had been handled many times. On the back, someone had written Sarah, 1985, in faded blue ink. Underneath the photo was a single envelope, yellowed with age. My name was written on the front in my father's careful handwriting. Inside was a one-page letter, folded and refolded so many times the creases had worn soft. The first line, "You deserve to know the truth." It was from my dad, but it didn't sound like the man I knew. His handwriting was careful, emotional even. Like each sentence hurt to write. Like he'd started and stopped a dozen times before getting the words right. He told me the woman in the photo was named Sarah Mackenzie. She wasn't my mom, but, in his words, she was the love of my life. They were together before my mom, back when he was in his early 20s. Engaged, deeply in love. She got pregnant, and he was thrilled. He said she brought out a side of him no one else ever had. Made him laugh, made him softer, made him believe in things he'd never dared to hope for. She saw something in me I didn't even know existed, he wrote. With her, I wasn't just going through the motions. I was alive. And then, she disappeared. No fight. No warning. Just gone. One day she was there, planning their wedding, talking about baby names. The next she wasn't. He came home from work to find her apartment empty. Landlord said she'd packed up and left that morning, paid the rest of her lease in cash, didn't leave a forwarding address. He searched for her, called friends, family, even checked hospitals, filed a missing person report, hired a private investigator with money he didn't have. Nothing. It was like she'd never existed. Eventually, after months of dead ends and sleepless nights, he gave up. He said it broke something fundamental in him, like a bone that never healed right. I kept thinking she'd come back, he wrote. That she'd show up at my door with an explanation that would make it all make sense. But she never did. And eventually, I had to accept that whatever we had wasn't enough to make her stay. A couple of years later, he met my mom at a church social. She was kind and steady and didn't ask too many questions about his past. They married quickly. Maybe too quickly, he admitted. I was born a year later. He said he tried to love again, tried to be the husband and father he was supposed to be, but he never fully came back from losing Sarah. Your mother deserved better than half a man, he wrote. She deserved someone who could love her completely, not someone still carrying around the ghost of someone else. I tried, Eli. I really did. But some wounds go too deep. Reading that, I finally understood why he'd always seemed so distant, why even his love felt careful and measured. He'd been protecting himself, keeping just enough distance to survive if someone else left. And then came the part that made my heart stop. He wrote that 5 years ago, just a few months before our big fight, a man showed up at his door. Said his name was Tyler McKenzie. Said Sarah was his mother, and that she had recently died of cancer. Said she left behind a letter naming my dad as his father, along with details about their relationship that only someone who'd been there could know. DNA confirmed it. I had a half-brother. Tyler was 28 years old, a teacher in Portland, married, with a 2-year-old daughter. He'd grown up thinking his father was dead, which is what Sarah had told him. It wasn't until she was dying that she finally told him the truth, that she'd left because she was scared, because she was 19 and pregnant and felt trapped, because she thought running away was easier than facing the future she'd helped create. She regretted it every day, Tyler had told my dad. She kept track of you, you know, knew about your marriage, about Eli being born. She wanted to reach out so many times, but she was ashamed. She didn't think she deserved forgiveness. My dad wrote that Tyler had come with no expectations, just wanted to talk, understand, maybe build something from the wreckage of decisions made decades ago. He'd brought photos, Sarah holding baby Tyler, Tyler's first day of school, his wedding day. A whole life that could have included my father, if things had been different. But my dad, true to form, shut the door on it. Literally and figuratively. Said it was too late. Said I didn't need to be burdened with someone else's choices. That I had already inherited enough of his damage. That some things were better left buried. I was scared, he admitted in the letter. Scared of what you'd think of me. Scared of opening up old wounds. Scared that if I let Tyler in, I'd have to face everything I'd spent 40 years trying to forget. So I did what I always do. I pushed him away. But he kept the letters, the photos, the DNA test, all of it locked away in that box, along with Tyler's contact information and a dozen letters he'd written over the years, each one shorter than the last, each one a little more resigned to the silence. The letter ended with words that I read over and over, trying to understand the man who'd written them. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I know that means I never found the courage to tell you this myself. But the truth shouldn't die with me. Tyler is your brother. He's a good man, better than I ever was. He deserves more than the rejection I gave him. You both do. The return address is in the second box, in the attic wall behind the insulation. I couldn't face him, but maybe you can. Maybe you can be the man I should have been. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept staring at the photo, at Sarah's smile, thinking about the life my father had lived before I existed. The love he'd lost, the son he'd found and turned away. I thought about Tyler, growing up without a father, then finding one who wanted nothing to do with him. I thought about all the dinners my dad and I had shared in silence, all the conversations we'd never had, all the walls he'd built to keep the past at bay. The next morning, I went back into the attic, found the second box hidden behind pink fiberglass and brittle wood, exactly where he'd said it would be. Inside were the things Tyler had brought, baby photos that showed Sarah's smile and a toddler's face, a few letters he'd written to my dad after being rejected, each one more heartbreaking than the last, and an envelope with a faded Oregon address on it. There was also a folder with medical records, Sarah's death certificate, Tyler's birth certificate with father unknown, written in careful script, the DNA test results that confirmed what everyone already knew. At the bottom of the box was a small notebook filled with my father's handwriting. He'd been keeping track of Tyler's life through social media and public records. Tyler's college graduation, his wedding announcement, the birth of his daughter. My father had been watching from a distance, too proud or too scared to reach out, but unable to completely let go. I didn't know what I was going to do. I sat with it for weeks, carrying Tyler's letters in my jacket pocket, reading them on the bus to work, during lunch breaks, late at night when I couldn't sleep. Just letting it all sink in. The anger at my father for keeping this secret. The sadness for Tyler, who'd been rejected by the father he'd finally found. The curiosity about this brother I'd never known existed. And something else. This tiny, growing feeling that maybe Tyler deserved more than what he got. That we both did. So I wrote him a letter. Short, honest. Told him who I was. That I found Dad's letter. That I was sorry for what had happened. That I wanted to talk, if he was open to it. A week later, I got an email. The subject line was, "Been waiting a long time for this." We talked on the phone first. His voice was deeper than I'd expected, but there was something familiar in his laugh. We talked about Dad, about Sarah, about the strange circumstances that had brought us together. Tyler was gracious about the whole thing, more gracious than I would have been. He said he'd made peace with our father's rejection years ago, that he'd just been grateful to finally know the truth about where he came from. Then we video called. Seeing his face was surreal. He looked like Dad, but softer somehow. Younger. And his smile? That was definitely Sarah's. We talked for hours. About everything. About nothing. About how much silence can really cost you. We agreed to meet in person the following month. I flew to Portland, nervous and excited and terrified all at once. When I saw him waiting at the airport, holding a sign with my name on it, I almost started crying. He was taller than I'd expected, with Dad's broad shoulders and serious eyes, but when he smiled, really smiled, he looked like the woman in that photograph. We spent 3 days together. I met his wife, played with his daughter, saw the life he'd built despite everything. We talked about Dad, about the choices he'd made, about the family we could have been if things had been different. But mostly, we just got to know each other. Two strangers connected by DNA and circumstance, and a father who'd carried too many secrets for too long. I still don't know what this will become. We're taking it slow, building something from nothing, learning how to be brothers at an age when most people take that relationship for granted. But I do know one thing. My dad tried to bury the past, to lock it away in a box and pretend it didn't exist. But the past doesn't stay buried. It waits, quietly, patiently, until someone finally decides to open the box and let the truth breathe. And I'm glad I did. Because now I understand that the distant look in my father's eyes wasn't emptiness. It was remembering. And the silence between us wasn't indifference. It was protection. And the man I thought I knew was just one version of someone far more complicated. Someone who'd loved and lost, and chosen to carry that burden alone rather than risk losing again. Tyler and I are planning to visit Sarah's grave together next month. We're going to bring flowers and photos and maybe, finally, some piece to a story that's been unfinished for too long. Dad was wrong about one thing. The truth isn't a burden. It's the only thing that sets you free.